All right. All right. Let's this is going to be a bit of a shorter year. My parents and my aunt and my uncle did just leave on Monday. So shout out to them if they're listening to the recording. But yeah, so I did want to just spend, 10, 15 minutes or so schmoozing about Elul prep. Because very often you get to Elul and it's, oh, Elul, Rosh Chodesh hits, and you get that inspiration, and then it disappears, and all of a sudden, you're standing in the middle of Elul, smack in the middle of the month, and you've barely done anything, and then 2 weeks later you stand at Rosh Hashanah, you've also not done anything either. Um, so there needs to be a mind shift coming off of the summer as you go into Chodesh Elul. The problem is that the way things are structured in America and Israel also, but the way things are structured in America is that you're still in summer mode, right, for another 2 weeks. Now that obviously varies, right, depending on the Israeli calendar, but the Israeli calendar, the Hebrew Jewish calendar. But this year that puts you smack in the middle of Elul, right? If you start school, let's say you go to college or whatever, right, and now you're all right. Now you have a mind shift switch to start working and to start putting in effort, etc. If you wait until school starts, so now you're halfway through Elul, you're close to Rosh Hashanah. So it's important to at least, right, Rosh Chodesh is Sunday, Monday, right? It's important to make a mind shift switch, downshift or whatever car model, metaphor you want to use, to get back into, normal year-long mode, especially right when it comes to Rosh Hashanah and Tshuva and Elul, etc. Now, this is not going to be a Tshuva drasha, right? It's obviously always great to do Tshuva. Halavai, we should do Tshuva all our lives, and Elul can be a model for our entire lives. It's very appropriate to have a Tshuva drasha in the middle of Nisan or whatever in Adar, right? Just like it is, excuse me, just before Elul. But let's talk about specifically this shift in mindset and how to kind of like shift our brains out of summer chilling, right, and into Elul mode, to kind of like start getting yourself getting up and moving. And it's not just a matter of flipping a switch in your brain. It has to be actively done. Right. It's not something you can do automatically. You need to learn and actually activate, right, your brain to, I don't know if you want to, again, using the car muscle. It's not an automatic, it's a stick shift, right? You need to actually shift your brain into Elul and Riyamim Noraim and year-long mode. So the first thing you have to do in order, and it's not just like you flip a switch, you have to do certain things. So the first thing you have to do, right, is to recognize all of Hakadosh Baruch Hu has done for us and thank him for it, right? When a person is charged with repairing a relationship, right? Let's say you had a fight with, your significant other or friend or relative or sister or whatever. That's what tshuva is, right? Lashuv, right? To return, right? The first thing you need to do, right, is to appreciate the other side, right, and acknowledge all the other side has done for us, and certainly in a scenario where we're returning to Kosh Baruch Hu, right, to really, really focus and remind ourselves, right, what we owe Hashem and what He has done for us. Rav Melech quotes the Sefer Charedim, right? Points out, and the pasuk says in last week's parsha, in Parshas Ekev, pasuk says, "V'zachartas kol haderech asher holichecha Hashem Elokecha ze arba'im shana ba'midbar." Right? You should remember all the path that Hashem took you, right? The 40 years in the desert. And says the Sefer Charedim, notice the word choice. The word choice is v'zacharta, and you shall remember, right? That word is used, right, to create mitzvos aseh, to remember, Amolig, Shabbos, right, etc. We have the Sheis Zechiros. Okay, this one is not part of the Sheis Zechiros. The 6 things we're commanded to remember. It doesn't say Zachor. It's not a mitzvah per se or a commandment, but it says V'zacharta. You should remember. It's right, the same language. Right? It doesn't have the same power as the other ones, but we're commanded to remember the entire path Hashem took us in the desert. And you can take that one of many ways, and there are different Mussar Schmoozes you can come with it. But the Sefer Charedim says that if it were commanded to remember all the path that Hashem took our forefathers out of Mitzrayim, right, taking care of giving them water, giving them man, saving them from danger, taking care of them, etc. So Kal v'chomer, right, we have to remember the kindnesses and miracles that Hashem has done for us, right, since we've been born. Right, we say in Nishmas, right, Nishmas Kol Chai on Shabbos, and if you say that tefillah stam, so one of the phrases in that tefillah is Ein anachnu maspikim lados lecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu. Right, we are not able to give enough thanks, right, ulevarech et shimcha, or to bless your name. Al achas me elef alef alfei alafim v'rive rivavos pa'amim. That is not a typo. That I didn't misspeak. That is 1,000, thousands, thousands, and 10,000, 10,000s of times of hatovos shasisa me'avosenu miyamanu, the chesed and the goodness that you did with our forefathers and with us. Just to do that math right for you, right? Elef times an elef times elef, that 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000 is a billion, and it's in plural, so it's billions, right? And then it's really might be even more, right? If you count the fourth one, okay, what if you, whatever, that could be times 1,000 again. So maybe it get to trillions. I don't know. Revei Revovos is 10,000 times 10,000 is 100 million. You get the point, right? You multiply those two together. I don't need to do the math. I have no idea what that comes out to, but you get the idea, right? There are certain millions upon millions of things that Hakadosh Baruch Hu has done for us, right? At every moment of the day, that we have to get on board with and remember. One of that was one of the great things about Victor Miller, right? About amongst other things, right? Talking about how many things you have to appreciate from Hakadosh Baruch Hu, right? He used to say things like, "You think your life is bad? Well, that guy doesn't have an arm," or something like that. Like, you think your dating life is rough? Well, that woman is 38 and she's not married yet, right? Through no fault of her own, right? A person thinks that their health is lousy, right? There are people in the ground whose health is worse. Right. And he would always say, like, things like that, like appreciate the small things, right? The relief of, a good deep breath of air, or the flavor of a peach, or like the color of a flower that you happen to notice when you're walking by, right? All those things, right? Like Joey Newcomb says, right? Those are kisses from Hashem. Right, when I remember, again, I told you guys this story, but when I was running the New York City Marathon with my brother last year, so we passed guys with like prosthetic legs, and my brother would be like, "Well, my calf muscle hurts, but that guy doesn't have a calf, so I probably shouldn't be complaining." Right, so we have to recognize what a Kosh Baruch Hu has done for us, right? Not only the big things, right, but also the little things, right? To take, not to take that for granted, right? To truly get figure out a fraction of the scope, right, of how much we owe a Kosh Baruch Hu, right? We probably can't actually get all the way, right? But at least if we start improving in that area, right, we realize how much Kosh Baruch Hu has done for us. That's stage one, right? In starting to prepare to do tshuva, to recognize how much we owe a Kosh Baruch Hu. Right? Melech Kotz Orachayim on the pasuk also in last week's parsha, it says another v'zacharta. It says v'zacharta as Hashem Elokecha. Remember Hashem, because He is the one who gives you strength, right, to accomplish, to do things in this world, right? And the Rachaim writes that a person has to think and focus and remember, right? V'zacharta is, again, like we said, is a command, right? As we mentioned, right, to remember this stuff about all the goodness Hashem has done for us, and says the Orachaim because there's a Yetzer Hara specifically designed to make us forget this. And as Rav Melech points out, literally the next pasuk is Vayam shachach tishkach es Hashem Elokecha v'alachta acharei Elohim achirim. And if you forget Hashem, you go chasing other gods. You start chasing false gods, false isms, false reasons for your success. Literally, right? That's the next pasuk. Melech tells a story about Rav Shlomo Brevda, who lived here in Yerushalayim, I think, right? Moved there still in the 50s. I think he was American originally. Anyway, once he slipped, right, coming down an old building, right, and at the last moment, right, I forget exactly, I'm not clear exactly the details of the story, but long story short, he kind of like grabbed onto some railing of some sort at the last possible moment and saved his life. So again, it was some sort of nace, Seta Gomel, and he went to the Chazon Ish the next day. Right, and he commented that he had seen a miracle, right, and he's so sure of the Ashkacha that Hashem was watching over him, taking care of him, etc. It said a gomel, right, and he said the next day everything went back to normal, as if like he had not had anything, right, no miracle, nothing, right. It was a regular day for him. So the Chazon Ish said, "You think you're special?" Right? Everyone has millions upon millions upon millions of miracles happening to them at every moment of the day, but there's a special Yetzer Hara that makes us forget all those miracles that happen to us. Right? And our job is to remind ourselves of the incredible amount of chesed that Kosh Baruch Hu is doing for us, right? Not only every single day, but every moment, right? Every moment of our lives. So that's job number one, to realize what we owe Kosh Baruch Hu, right? And how much, right, He truly gives to us, right? Obviously, and if He's giving to us, it must be that He cares about us, because if He's, right, as a person gives, right, person loves, right? We've done the giving, loving thing, right? That's already that's not schmooze for now. But okay, anyway, so that's step number one. Step number two is to how to truly change. And when a person kind of prepares themselves to change, right, it's better than jumping into change and just winging it. Now, there is a phrase, I think it's always quoted in the Medrash in Eicha. I've never actually seen it inside, but not because it doesn't exist, because I've never looked. But everybody always quotes it, at least from the Medrash in Eicha, the phrase called Chachma Bagoyim Tamin. That if you think there's chachma amongst the goyim, right, if a person tells you that some goyim are smart, they have chachma, whatever, you should believe them. Um, and frankly, right, a lot of the things that I'm about to tell you, I'm not going to tell you so much, but are also brought down in Jewish sources as well. But it's said very well by a certain guy who's apparently a nice guy. I don't know, never heard of it, and never met him. But if I don't know if anybody's ever seen the book or read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, but it is fantastic. And he talks about change. And again, like I said, this is also brought down in the Jewish Makoros, but I thought it's Kedai just to kind of point out what he says. And he says fascinatingly, and again, how true is this? Yeah, I would imagine it's pretty accurate. Again, you can make your own decisions, and then frankly, if you want to pick up something to read that's, you know, I don't know, when you're not learning, so then you could definitely pick it up. It's pretty good. Um, he says there are three different types of change. He says the first change is when a person tries to focus and finish their outcomes, right? Like they want to, set a goal of losing weight or whatever. Right? The second way to change is a person changes their progress, their process rather, right? Their eating process or whatever. They'll, how many times a day they eat for whatever. But finally, and this is what I wanted to bring out, he said the deepest layer of change is when a person changes their identity, meaning that they change themselves into someone who doesn't do that. I don't eat that stuff, right? Instead of, saying, okay, I'm only going to eat 2 meals a day instead of three, they say, okay, I'm a person who doesn't eat junk food, for example. That's a person, but you become someone else. For example, when I've been, again, just to go back to the marathon training, right? Again, fulfilling the joke that if you're a marathon runner, right, don't he'll tell you about it. They'll tell you about it at some point. You don't have to worry. But yes, when you're training, right, for something, right? So the person gets an identity. They don't eat that, right? You can't eat junk food if you're training for a marathon. It's just going to wreck you. So when you're training for a marathon, right, it doesn't matter that you're offering me my favorite Entenmann's and I'm starving. I don't eat that, right? I'm not that type of person. So that's the best way to go about a change. If a person decides, well, I'm not going to say Lashon Hara, that's very nice, right? But when it's not something that that will come back to you later when you have a strong taiva for avodah zarah, right? If a person is trying to wean themselves off some sort of Netflix show, so you can say I'm only watching an hour of Netflix a day. That works. But if you're a person who doesn't watch that show, right, that's better. That will lead to deeper and more powerful results. Again, the example in the 2010s was Game of Thrones. I don't know what the example is nowadays. Right? If you were to say, I don't watch that show, I'm a person, I don't, that's obviously going to give you a sense of pride, and the chances that you will violate that are much less because now it's a sense of identity, it's a sense of, arrogance, it's a sense of your ego, right, that you're running against. And that's again that if that's the way you're going to change, so it's very possible that you'll have better results as opposed to just being like, well, I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying Lashon Hara anymore, or I'm not watching that show anymore. Right then, okay. So anyway, fine. Another thing we have to do before we prep for Elul, why will we prep for Elul before we get there, is to, again, this is chizuk that you've heard before, but it's a person needs to realize their own individual worth. That Kosh Baruch Hu is interested in every single person and every single action of every single person. And Yetzer Hara is very good at making us think that we don't matter and that Hashem doesn't care and that it doesn't make a difference whether you watch that Netflix show or say the Lashon Hara or whatever. But that's not true. And again, we've talked about this at length, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. But it's for example, the Torah says at the beginning of Parshas Bamidbar, right, that the Kosh Baruch Hu counted Bnei Israel. The Kosh Baruch Hu took a census, and Rashi says there that the reason Hashem did that is to show His love, right, just like a collector who counts his possessions. And Rav Melech points out that the Chidush Harim and others explain that the purpose of accounting is to show that Kosh Baruch Hu loves each and every single person, like the thing is Chabad say that the person's birthday shows that the world couldn't exist without you, or something like that. And Hashem wants to show that every single person is valuable. And Moshe Feinstein in Darash Moshe, right, says that that's why we read Bamidbar before Shavuos, because some of us don't think that our learning is important, it's not chashuv, whatever, but it is. It's true, and our Torah learning is very important, and we should stay up and learn as much as we can, etc., etc. And says Ramelech Chidush Harim says that that's why Bnei Yisrael are compared to stars, because from just like stars, right, from a distance, right, they look very insignificant, and that's how the Yetzer Hara makes us feel. But up close and in truth, right, they're enormous, powerful balls of energy. That's every single one of us, right? We think that we're small, but really we have tremendous, tremendous kokos, right? That we only, right, have begun to understand. So when the Yetzer Hara does that to you, right? So don't let it say that, right? Make sure, right, that you're able to kind of realize your own self-worth and understand that you have work to do because you are important and you do matter. Last week's parsha also, when the pasuk says "Ekev Tishmun," right? You listen to the mitzvos and you'll get all this bracha. Right? Rashi there says that we're talking about the mitzvos that you can just step on with your heel, right? Even those mitzvos. And Tiferes Shlomo says that again that also in this great darkness, right? Any type of hisorus, any type of accomplishment, right, is very near and dear to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's avodas Hashem or learning a tefillah, whatever, right? Even if it's not 100%, right? The Yetzer Hara also will be like, okay, you matter, but you can never fulfill right the mitzvah as it's supposed to be done, or you can never fulfill the mitzvah like your role models or your forefathers, etc. Well, still a tiny bit of avodas Hashem nowadays, right, is still considered to be chashav to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And says to Tiferes Shlomo that just since the gullus is long and the darkness is thick, it's very beautiful language he has over there. And the Tsaros run after us, and the Yetzer Hara chases us without any, without relenting at whatever. And nowadays things are so much more difficult with all the stuff that's all around us. A little bit of holiness, right, does more in the deep, deep darkness than you might imagine. So even a small, tiny accomplishment of a small mitzvah that maybe a 10%, proper kavana. Right, it doesn't hold a. If you think that doesn't hold a candle, right, to what the mitzvahs of back in the day, it's not true. Right? It's not true. Right? You don't have to hold up your actions to previous generations. Believe me, if the 1800s had Netflix, they'd have a rough go of it thing, rough go of it also. Right? So hold your head up. Don't feel like your accomplishments don't matter. Right? Even tiny little accomplishments in this world, right, are like great accomplishments back in the day. Right, that's Rav Melech points out also that the pasuk says, right, "Uvikashtem misham es Hashem Elokecha umatzasa," that when a person is in Gullus, that you'll look out, you'll search out for a Kosh Baruch Hu, and you will find him. Right, and that when he says that means right when a metzia, again this is but well, I don't know, I'm getting a little bit off track here. But a metzia, something that you find, says Ramelech, based on the Gemara about the Yagati Matzati in Megillah, that something you find is something that you're not expecting to get. Right? You find $100 on the floor. Right, you didn't expect to get that $100. A salary, you're expecting to get a salary. But a metzia, something that you find, right? That's not something that you expected. So he says the language there. If you search out "Ubikashtem misham es Hashem Elokecha," right? If you search out Hashem umatzasa, and you'll find him. You'll find even more than you expected, right? If you put in a little bit of effort, take a little bit of a leap, right, to be a little bit more firm or do this mitzvah a little bit better, that halacha a little bit more, right? Avoid that aver a little bit, right? Not only will you be successful, you'll be wildly successful, even more, right, than you expected. Finally, just two, just quick points from this week's parsha. Parshas Re'eh, again begins Re'eno Anochi Nosen Lefnechem Hayom Bracha Klala. Right, check it out today. Ani Nosen Lefnechem Hayom Bracha Klala. Right, it mentions the word Hayom two more times in the next two psukim. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but it says the word Hayom three times in the first couple of psukim. And the Sivas Shalom, right, explains. Pretty well-known story of I think it's the Koviner Rebbe that he once had a Q&A of sorts, and he said, "What's the most halacha? The most important halacha. See, this is what happens when it's after midnight. What's the most important halacha to fulfill?" And they expected him to say Shabbos or kosher, and he said, "Whatever halacha you're faced with right now, right? Whatever you're dealing with right now at this moment. Right? You're listening to this shir. That's the most important thing to do. If you're driving in your Tesla, I don't know who else. Where are you guys? That's the most important. To drive safe. Right? To keep yourself driving. That's the most important halacha. Right? Shabbos in a couple of days from now, that will be the most important halacha. Whatever you're doing right now, hayom." Right, and that was the secret to Moshe's Schmooze in the beginning of Parshas Re'eh. Right, and then Moshe was illustrating, right, it says in the Shiva Shalom, what's important in life. Right, the moment that you're involved in right now. Right now is not yet Elul. Right, Tshuva obviously is important and valuable throughout the year, but right now we're prepping for Elul. Right, we're kind of getting ready to shift that mindset to accomplish in Elul, right, what we're supposed to accomplish. Right, the key is to be present in what you're doing right now. And again, also, he says, Sloan Rebbe also, he says that not only does that mean that you should be present in what you're doing right now, but it also means that you should do hayom, right, whatever opportunity you have. Meaning, don't let the Yetzer Hara say you'll do it later. Right now, just do the mitzvah later, just work on yourself later, just take the mindset switch out of summer later, take another week, take another day, just chill and relax. The second you push something, off, right, very often that inspiration doesn't happen. Whenever you're faced with an opportunity to do a mitzvah, right, don't listen to the Yetzer Hara, do it hayom, right, don't delay. And as you might imagine, right, there's all these statements in Chazal. I don't need to kind of, we've talked about this before. I don't need to elaborate, right? The Ramchal writes in the Parak about Zrizus, right, that, that the person should be proactive about doing their mitzvahs, right? Obviously, a person has tremendous amounts of distractions, right? It's important to ignore the distractions, and especially as Elul is coming, right? So many years, right? We all of a sudden show up to davening in Rosh Hashanah, and all of a sudden we haven't done a single thing, right, to prepare for tshuva. And so right now, right, we're holding right before Elul, and we're a month and change before Rosh Hashanah, right? So that's what we should do. And start making a plan, start figuring out, right, how you can A, appreciate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, B, make that mind shift in yourself, right? Having that ego to say, I don't do these types of averos. That's the proper way to change. Realize that your worth, your actions are worth something, and get to work, right, immediately, right now without delay. All right, so I know that's a little bit shorter than usual, but that's what I got on 2 days' notice, and it's a shame. We'll meet again next week. We'll time and place to be determined, but we'll schmooze it up. All right, guys. Good to see you.
Thank you.